Women's sports exist as a separate category from men's sports because of a basic biological reality. Men and women are different physically, and in some sports it would be unfair to force women to compete on the same playing field as men. For centuries, we have recognized that, and for decades in this country, women have benefited from having access to a separate playing field. But now the left's gender insanity is destroying that. So last week, Rachel McKinnon, a biological male, won the women's track cycling world championship and set a world record in doing so. Now, several current and former women's cyclists are coming out to defend their sport from a takeover by men. Kara Dansky is a board member at Women's Liberation Front, and we're happy to have her back on this show. So, Kara, what is the case they are making that you are making against what just happened?
Thank you so much for having me here. And I just want to take brief issue with how you characterize the issue as being from the left, because I just want to say there are many Democrats and people who identify as being on the left who are very angry about the takeover of women's sports and how the Democratic Party is handling
That's a fair point, and you are
gender.
certainly on the left, and I was just saying in the commercial break, it takes a lot of guts for you to come on the show, so I'm grateful that you have.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a lifelong member of the Democratic Party, and many of us cannot get a voice on this issue in most media, so I'm very grateful.
So why is that? I mean, let's just broaden this out. I'll just do it right away. This, if you had told me, and I cover politics and have for 30 years, 5 years ago that there would be a consensus in Washington that you were not allowed to question any of this stuff, I would have said that's insane. Today, there is that consensus. It's dangerous even to raise questions about it.
Agreed.
What happened?
Agreed. So getting back to the case at hand, as you said, McKinnon is a male cyclist who on Saturday won a championship in the women's cycling competition in Manchester, England. And there are many feminists, women, who are questioning the right of male athletes to compete in women's sports. And this seems to be unacceptable for us to take this position. But we will continue to take this position that it is unacceptable for males to compete in women's sports. It's very important in this country for the purposes of maintaining Title IX protections for women and girls, which is something that my organization, the Women's Liberation Front, cares very much about.
So you're making a pretty straightforward, I think, reality-based case. And by doing so, you risk physical harm. How do we get to that place so fast?
Physical harm, social ostracization, risk to livelihood. I personally know several women who have been fired from positions for voicing concerns for the rights, privacy, and safety of women and girls. I want to also just make the point that many of your viewers may not understand that there are many people on the political left, including especially feminists, lesbians, gay men, and bisexual people who are gravely concerned about what the Democratic Party is doing on the topic of gender identity and pushing the notion that men can be women and women can be men, which is, first of all, regressive politically because it aligns with the notion of gender, which we want to abolish, but it's also just it's inaccurate scientifically.
Yes.
And there are many Democrats who are willing to say this, but many of your viewers may not know that because we are generally subjected to a media blackout.
Boy, you're always welcome on this show. I just never hear from them. Ever. I never hear anybody say that.
And the reason that you don't hear from them is that those of us on the left, Democrats, cannot get a voice on NPR, cannot get a voice in the New York Times, cannot get a voice in the Washington Post. We have tried. We have said we have a feminist and a gay rights objection to the trans movement, to trans ideology. And no one will hear us. No one will publish us.
It's just, well, as I said, and I mean it, you're always welcome on the show, and I'm glad that you came tonight. Kara, thank you very much.
Appreciated.